Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream presentation here on the Tattooed Historian's Facebook and YouTube channel. My name is John. I am the Tattooed Historian, and today is From Heroes to Sentenced, Jewish World War I Veterans in the Holocaust. And I'm joined today by my friends Peter Rosenbluth and Rabbi W. Jack Romberg. And thank you both for being here. I really do appreciate that. Peter is a director, producer, writer, colorist, and genealogist who made the Jewish 48ers in the American Civil War. From passion for educational and memorial purposes, his goal is to make a remarkable documentary on the World War I Jewish soldiers of Germany and Austro-Hungary and on their tragic fate in the Holocaust, which is what we are going to mainly talk about today, although I'm sure we'll plug the 48ers as well as we go along, Peter. And we are honored to have Rabbi W. Jack Romberg with us. Rabbi Romberg served 18 years as the rabbi for Temple Israel in Tallahassee, Florida. He retired in 2019, and he is here today to speak of his great uncle, Richard Stern, who was awarded the Iron Cross in the First World War. Stern defied the Nazi SA in 1933 and later joined the U.S. Army at the age of 43. Rabbi Romberg is releasing a book in September of this year about his experiences entitled A Doorway to Heroism. Thank you both for being here, gentlemen. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate this talk today. Peter, I want to start out with you. Because you were the first person to contact me, and you were like, I'm doing this interesting documentary. I would love to have you look it over and, look over the idea and everything. And you were well underway with that. Peter, how did this whole process start as far as you getting involved in documentaries and you becoming a producer and just enjoying the historical narrative?
Yes, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peter Rosenbluth, and how it started? Well, my family has long Jewish military traditions from Hungary, so this topic was always very close to my heart. So in 2016, with my childhood friend and DNA cousin, who's also Peter Zachman, we had a vision. We wanted to produce films on Jewish military history because we felt that this topic has been really left out of the cinemas and even of history books. So that's when we started the Jewish 48ers, because the 19th century was the rebirth of Jewish military history after the ancient Israelite stories. And we indeed did this film from passion. We released it for free for educating people. This film was telling about the Jews and their role in the democratic revolutions in Europe and their later role in the American Civil War. And most of these people fought for the Union anyway. So now we are working on a lot bigger project, which will be about the story of 500,000 Jewish soldiers who fought for the Central Powers, for Germany and Austro-Hungary in the World War I, and on their tragic fate in the Holocaust, because these veterans shared the same fate as any other Jew in the Holocaust. They were murdered in gas chambers. Many of them were my relatives. And this story has never been told, but we are also colorizing footage, archival footage, and we are restoring it to a level that hasn't really been seen before. Or I think only one film was made, Peter Jackson's film. But we have a vision, and actually, if you see some work samples so far, already colorized footage, I think we are getting there. So that's the plan, to tell the tragic story of the Jewish war veterans in a very, very dramatic and artistic way at the same time, to commemorate them, to remember their sacrifice and faith, and hopefully people will see the Holocaust in a different way, because they will see that these Jews were patriots of the World War I, and the reward was being killed by their own countries. And
that colorization project, Peter, that process has really allowed modern audiences to get a new taste of the past, right? Because of what Peter Jackson did and what others are doing, including yourself. That's a new way of connecting with the past, right? Because sometimes it's kind of hard to do that with black and white.
Yeah, that's true. And also we recently came to an agreement with the German Federal Archives. I didn't want to show just public domain footage, what everybody saw. So for example, we have footage of French black soldiers who were captured by Germans, and we have unearthed stories from Jewish war accounts that the Jewish soldiers were really so surprised that they were fighting against black soldiers, because the French, they liked sending the black soldiers first to charge because they wanted to get rid of them. It's another tragic story. And of course, the Jews were also the first ones on the battlefield because they wanted to prove that they are good patriots of their country. So not only we will have really some stunning footage, but most of the footage in the documentary had never been showed before.
Mm-hmm. And Jack, thank you again for being here. It really means a lot to both Peter and myself that you took some time out of your schedule to join us today. Offline, we talked briefly about the history of Jewish soldiers in European armies, really, and especially in German armies or the Prussian army. Jack, would you like to talk with us just for a short time about the pre-World War I history of these troops serving in Prussian or Germanic forces? Because you touched on the Franco-Prussian War with us offline.
Yes, like I had mentioned when we were offline, Jews in Germany were basically emancipated from being separated from the rest of German society back in 1812. Well, that was in Prussia in 1812. And they really wanted to be part of Prussia and German society in general. And they felt that being in the army was an important way to show their dedication and their patriotism to whether it was Prussia or whether it would be Germany as a whole. Once Germany became a whole country, all of the states united in 1870. And of course, the war between Prussia and France in 1870, that drew a huge number of Jews into the army. And a lot of them won medals, but it did not stop some anti-Semitism, some oppression that occurred just a few years afterwards when the stock market fell down and people were blaming the Jewish people, the citizens of Germany. Many of them blamed the Jewish people for the economic fall, and yet they had nothing to do with it. It was just the way it unfolded. Mm-hmm. But the Jewish people in then united Germany, when the Social Democratic Party was formed later in the 19th century, it was in favor of and really pushed for civil rights for all people. I mean, not just Jews, but for people in general. And that drew a lot of interest from the Jewish population, and especially then in the early 20th century, I'm talking before World War I, there was tremendous amount of interest and following. In fact, in the election in 1912, 85% of the Jewish voters either voted for the Social Democratic Party or another party that was on the same liberal side as the Social Democratic Party, because they were pushing for civil rights. And so when the war broke out in 1914, the Jewish population of Germany really wanted to show its patriotism again. And on August the 4th of 1914, Kaiser Wilhelm, the king, the emperor of Germany, made an announcement saying how it did not matter what any person's religion was, or what their class was, or what their politics were. Everyone had to be treated equally. And on that day, on August 4th of 1914, a huge number of Jews then volunteered for the German army to show their patriotism. And one of the Jews who volunteered was Richard Stern's older brother, who was 11 years older than him, Heinrich Stern. He volunteered, and he served the entire war on the front line for the German army in World War I. So those are examples of the dedication of German Jews to patriotism and by being part of the German army.
That's fascinating. It's we spoke about this offline too. It has a lot of parallels with the African American experience, where they may have been freed and emancipated in 1863, and then constitutional amendments in 1865, but they still had served under the impression that maybe this war will make us equal on standing, especially the First World War. We see it again coming around again, Spanish-American War and such. So it's a really interesting thing to think about the parallels with those two. Peter, you've been working nonstop until COVID, really, in the archives themselves. Now you've been working a lot outside the archives. Where have you done some of the research, and how has the process panned out as far as that's concerned? How has it worked out?
Yes, so we have done a number of different researches using my genealogy experience, and the most tragic was when we were comparing the Golden Album of Hungarian Jewish soldiers. This was a book which the Jewish people, former veterans, wrote in 1938 to demonstrate the anti-Jewish laws in Hungary. This included 20,000 names. So we took the names and we started to type these names to the United States Holocaust and Memorial Museum's database, to the Yad Vashem's database. And we found so many. We found so many and identified many, because we had the surname, we had the first name, we had the location, and we did. It really took over a year actually, but we checked their address, their occupation, so many different records to make sure that the two people are identical. Yes, there were the birth dates. And it was tragic. And first there was my family, and then we were doing this research to others. We also researched in the American Jewish Archives in Cincinnati, mostly on the four theaters, but as we were there, we also had a look into the German history. Parts of the footage in the film will come from the German Federal Archives, and we were also researching in the Jewish Museum and the Archives in Hungary, and we also had online support from the Jewish Museum Vienna from Austria, and we also researched the Jewish Museum Berlin's collections. So it was a tremendous work, and also so many regimental books were published recently. In the last regimental books means when the war ended for Austria-Hungary, the history of each regiment was written. It detailed heroic actions. All of the people who served were listed in the book. There was a roster of them, and we found out that there were so many heroic Jewish stories, twice as more if we take a look at the proportions of the Jews in the army. And it turned out that they were willing to take more risky missions because they wanted to show that they are good patriots. And many times this was a fatal decision because they died and they were killed in action.
Right. My great friend, who's also a First World War historian, James Taub, is in the chat, and he would like to pose a question. I like to bring in some questions from the audience as we go forward. It helps all of us understand where the direction we're going to go with some things. And Jack and Peter, either one of you could answer this one, because I think it's a great question. Any wartime diary or account of a Jewish soldier that you've come across that would be meaningful to the audience?
Well, clearly I have. I'm the book that I'm writing shows what happened to actually Richard Stern, Heinrich Stern's younger brother. Richard Stern, of course, I have a pretty good sense of what he did in World War I, because I have the service booklet that he had to have as a member of the German army, and it lists all of his battles, and it lists, you know, what he trained for and how he began. For example, in the beginning of his term in the army, he began fighting in Russia, you know, against the Russians. He was drafted as opposed to volunteered. He was drafted on June 20th of 1917. Okay. And his entering the German army was very different from his older brother who volunteered, because by the middle of 1916, there was a lot of feeling in German community that the war should be over and they should get out of the war. So his being in the German army was under a different circumstance than when his brother Heinrich was in the army. So his then being so brave that he ended up getting the Iron Cross for participating in a number of German offenses against the British and French armies. And that all happened from February of 1918 through the summer of 1918, because he was transferred from the Russian front after the Bolsheviks took over Russia in November of 1917. By the end of 1917, he had been transferred then, to the Western Front. And a lot of the battles he was in were around Flanders in Belgium. So his story as a machine gunner, as on the front line, as part of German offenses, we have that story. And so by getting books or even short stories of people who participated, that's where we get that information.
Yeah.
Now, I get it, of course, from his registration booklet that he had to be in.
Right. Peter, with some of the film work and finding the original film, what was that experience like when you first saw some of the stuff that's new to us? Because you said you've found unpublished things that in film. What was it like uncovering that when you're working on this project and you have that kind of like golden nugget moment where it's like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this before and I don't know if it's ever been published? And what kind of an impact do you think that'll have?
Well, I think it will be an interest of many people, because it is a World War I story, a Jewish story, a World War II story, and we will learn later why. Jack has a really interesting story on Richardson for the rest of his life, and also a Holocaust story, which is such a tragic genocide that we just must keep exploring it. I didn't think like this, that this hasn't been published. It was just very close to my heart, because I am also a descendant of World War I veterans and Holocaust survivors. And I decided that I would love to make it. But when I found out that it hasn't really been published, then I just started to develop the idea even more. I don't want to show what was shown before. I don't want to, I'm sure people are bored of the very few public domain videos. So quality work takes time, but that's what I wanted. So I think the result will be really great when the film is done. And just quickly back to the former question, I can recommend Fritz Beckhardt's Memories. I believe it was published in German language. Fritz Beckhardt was a flying ace of the German Air Force in the World War I, and I don't think he included his traumas during the Holocaust, because he was really humiliated and he didn't like talking about it, but definitely was proud of his World War I records. I believe he scored 17 air victories and he was close to the Red Baron as well. And the other book is in Hungarian language, unfortunately, but with lots of photos. It is the Golden Album of the Hungarian Jewish soldiers with 20,000 names. That's in the public domain, though, so it can be found online.
Wow. That's fantastic. Thank you for that, because I know a lot of people in my chat love book recommendations, and I think a lot of them probably have 20 or 30 on their wish list, and they're just adding and adding. They're like me. I have like 100, and won't get to it for another year at least, but they do appreciate that, because they're going to want to read more about this before your work comes out, Peter, and Jack. I know they're going to want to read your book as well, as much as I'm going to. Jack, for Richard and his brother, post First World War, do you have a lot of information on them as far as what life was like, maybe in the Weimar or anything like that, having this transition from First World War soldier to civilian, and then what we see transpiring in German politics?
Yeah, actually, I do have a lot of information. I actually have a whole chapter just on what I call the 1920s, the Roaring 20s. So Heinrich Stern had started a rather successful business already back in the early 1900s, around 1905, 1906. Once he was done with serving in World War I, he finally got married. He had a daughter, and this happened in 22, 23, 24. And he was, had a good business going. Now, their dad, Marcus Stern, had been working with Heinrich Stern for a while, but wanted to start his own business again. He had been very successful earlier. The family actually was originally from Weilerswist, Germany, a smaller town, about a half hour from Cologne, which is where they lived for most of their lives. He started a business because he wanted Richard Stern, his son Richard, the youngest son, to actually go into business with him, because Richard Stern had actually studied and been an apprentice for an international retail firm before he went into the war, and just after he graduated from his original school. So I have the information about their time in the in the business. The other thing I include in that chapter is the rise of the Nazi Party and its effect on part of the family. Actually, some cousins of theirs, their last name is Katz, because Uncle Richard's first cousin married into their family and became very active in their hugely successful business. One of the most wealthy Jewish families in Cologne in the 1920s. And so I relate what happened to them in 1928 as the Nazi Party started to gain some real popularity around the country, as well as in Cologne. People don't think of the Nazis in the 1920s so much. We think of them more in the 1930s, but I relate how that happened in the 1920s. Uncle Richard took over his dad's business and actually ran it extremely well. He made really good money until things went bad in the 1930s, and businesses were undermined by the Nazi government. Yes, that's the kind of information that I have and that I relate, in the book. And then the chapter after that relates the rising to power by the Nazi Party and how it affected, the Jewish people, and in particular, what then motivated Richard Stern. And I'm going to from now on call him Uncle Richard, because he was my great uncle and he was like my grandpa. Uncle Richard then was motivated to be a protester, the only protester in Cologne when the occasion occurred on April 1st of 1933.
Did Uncle Richard, why was he the only one? Was he treated differently due to his status, or because we have a question in the comment section about Tom Shea wrote that he's regarding Anne Frank's father. I've read that due to his status as a World War I veteran and a holder of the Iron Cross, he could have stayed in Theresienstadt. throughout the war? Was there special treatment for veterans in that camp? But it sounds like there might have been. I don't know if Richard had special pull, because you do have that photo of him with the staying defiantly in front of the SA, which is an amazing photo, and I put a link in the comments to that.
And that photo, like I had told you before, is in numerous museums around Germany. It's a rather popular picture, famous picture in Germany now. There was nothing different about Richard Stern, Uncle Richard. Again, this was just in Cologne, Germany in 1933. So the Nazis had just taken power. And what really motivated him was, one, of course, he was standing up for the Jewish people, but also he was very active in the Social Democratic Party and very much supporting of the Weimar Republic because it was a democratic republic. And he believed very much in the necessity of government being a democratic republic. And so he was known for basically protesting for two reasons. One was he was Jewish and he was standing up for the Jewish people. And two was that he felt that civil rights had to be done, had to be shown to people, and that it was his right as a veteran German soldier to express his feelings. And that's what gave him some of the courage, actually, to even go and protest, is that he felt that as a German soldier who was decorated and he's wearing his Iron Cross when he's protesting, he felt that at that moment that perhaps German citizens would show respect for him. Now, this happened in a few other cities and villages around Germany where Jewish war veterans would do something to protest against the Nazis. But Uncle Richard was the only one who did it in Cologne. And I have that information because of historians I interviewed with in Cologne a year and a half ago when I was in Cologne doing the research.
Wow. Peter, I wanted to ask you about a couple things with the project itself, with the documentary, because about 3 minutes into our presentation, one of my followers, Mr. Skudra, who might still be hanging out here, asked when this is coming out. And I know it's an ongoing project. And I'd love for you to touch on the work behind it and the work that is to come with this, and how you have sought support from others.
Yes. All right. So we are still producing it. So a little bit on the background. This is an independent documentary, and we are fiscally sponsored by the International Documentary Association, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization in the US, in LA, which let us collect donations which are tax deductible. So this is our fundraising strategy, and really I'm very thankful for Jack also for helping us with the fundraising and for many donors. Hopefully it will come out by the end of this year, by the 31st of December, potentially a bit earlier, but it really depends how do we get on with fundraising. So we work at the same time, but we also raise funds at the same time. Many people still work for free in this project because they see the importance of it. So we just hit the minimal budget. And I really have to mention his name, Jerry Klinger. He's a philanthropist of Jewish causes. He just really offered recently a generous donation. But minimal budget means that the technical costs are covered. We still don't get salaries for this. There are still unexpected costs, mostly due to the COVID regulations. But yeah, it will come out this year if all goes well. Yes, and regarding the previous question about if the Jewish veterans were treated differently, so the Holocaust did not unfold in one chapter. It was a longer process. In the end, from 1944, they were also gassed. They were also killed. Before, what they called privileges, I wouldn't really call them There was a book recently came out by Michael Geheran, Comrades Betrayed, and it gives a really good insight of Theresienstadt concentration camp. They were tortured, that was humiliating. And also it's my own thought, but what if you have some privileges, but your wife and your children and your friends and your loved ones don't have, so what's the point of having privilege? I mean, this entire situation is so disgusting what happened to them.
Yes, Jack, we have that photo, or you have that photo for your book of Richard standing defiantly beside the SA troopers who are guarding his door. It seems. What happens to Richard after that photo going forward? What becomes of Richard?
Well, he actually was arrested by the SS while because he was not only protesting, or the way he was protesting was handing out pamphlets condemning the Nazis, especially for what they were doing to Jewish war veterans, and so he was arrested. But this is a typical thing that happened with Jewish war veterans in the very beginning of the Nazi reign. And he was taken to a regular police station, and one of the policemen there had served in the army, knew Uncle Richard from there, looked at Uncle Richard as being a friend of his. And when he saw Uncle Richard in the police headquarters, he asked him, "Why are you here?" And he said, "I was arrested." So what he did is he sneaked him out the back door and got him out of there. And then for the next number of years, what Uncle Richard did is he started to realize that the Nazis were going to stay in power for a long time. Initially, he and many Jews in Germany felt that the Nazis wouldn't stay elected for long, and didn't think that they would actually take over and become it would become a full dictatorship. And of course, they were wrong. And so once he started to realize that they were not going to lose Nazi power so fast, he got much quieter for a while, and he had to start to adjust his business so that at least he could make enough money to support, his sister and her son, which is my dad. And so he did everything he could to just kind of keep quiet and keep the family, alive and eating and, being able to have a life. But then he actually took on something else that was rather brave and very, very, very civic in 1938 when the Anschluss happened. I don't know if you know what the Anschluss is. That was the takeover of Austria by the Germans. That caused a huge number of Jews in Vienna and Austria to have to flee. And a large number of them came up to Cologne because that was a way for them to get out of Germany or Austria. It would, like, for example, to get to Belgium. And a lot of Jews went to Belgium to try and escape Germany. And what Uncle Richard did is he took their house and he made it a place for fleeing Jews to stay. And it became a home, a temporary home for a pretty good number of Austrian Jews who were fleeing. And my father told me about that and mentioned about how Uncle Richard was helping them even get to the border and try and get out of, finally get out of Germany. So that was something he was willing to do at that point. And then in the summer of 38, he registered himself and Dad and his sister with the American embassy in Stuttgart to get visas. They didn't get them right away, but he registered with them. And so after Kristallnacht happened, he actually then processed, and because he had registered in the summer of 38, he was able to get the visas to get to the United States.
Wow. A lot of people don't realize just how much dare I say, logistical needs it took to escape and get out of these places. And I've heard people say, well, why didn't people just leave? Well, some people just can't leave, and some found out ways. It's a really interesting thing to think that each family was slightly different with how they approached this rising Nazi power, right?
I should actually also bring up that the American legal system in terms of accepting immigrants was very, very limited then, and there was a limitation to Jews as well. And the Jewish anybody trying to immigrate to America had to get somebody who would sponsor them, because the government would not accept an immigrant who might have needed money or support from the government. So one of the things that Uncle Richard had to arrange was to find relatives who were willing to make a pledge to the American government to cover any costs that they had. And they did. They had some family there through marriage. One of his sisters was married to a family that had people living in New York, and they were willing to make that pledge. And so Uncle Richard, he immigrated to America in middle of May of 1939. My dad and his mom couldn't join him then because of a problem with his mom's visa. But they actually immigrated to America. They were supposed to catch a ship in Hamburg, Germany, in late August of 1939. My dad, at 16 years old, had the sense that they shouldn't stay in Germany and they should catch the boat in France, not in Germany. And so they fled over to France in around August 25th of 39. And when they registered with the clerk who was taking them in, he looked at their paperwork and said, "Oh, you were supposed to catch this boat in Hamburg, Germany." And my dad said, "No, I felt that we had to leave Germany." And the clerk said to them, "You're a smart young boy, a smart young man, because we just stopped any stops. We are not doing any stops in Germany now." And so they got on the boat. It stopped in England before coming to America. It left England on August 31st, and on September 1st was the beginning of the war. So if they would have gone to Hamburg, I wouldn't be sitting here telling you this story. Right. And Uncle Richard would have been alone in New York.
Wow. That's amazing. See, that's why, to me, history is so much more interesting than fiction, because it's those stories like that just make it on the edge of your seat, trying to figure out how these people did what they did. It's just incredible. And Peter, Richard's just one story of how many thousands that you believe are out there where they were persecuted or they were put into camps and such. How many of these World War I Jewish veterans do you believe are out there, or what's a round number that you have come across in your research?
Yes, about 300 or 250,000 of them were at least still alive. Of course, many were killed in action, and many died later during the interwar periods. The proportion was the same compared to the Jewish population. There were no exceptions. So they didn't have special treatment. And, many of them were older people in 1944. So many of them were immediately gassed. Some who were younger or in a better physical condition, they were used for forced labor first, which was also terrible because their children died first. Like, Otto Frank's story is very similar, because he, as a veteran, he barely survived, but his daughter Margot and Anna died. So to be honest, I wouldn't want to see my daughters being killed. I think it's even worse.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I think what I really wanted to get across with a lot of this is that this is a huge story. This isn't some small thing where, it's just a few people who were persecuted or anything who are World War I veterans. This is 100,000, 150,000 people, that themselves and then their families on top of that, that are being persecuted. And I know, Peter, that you have a question you would love to ask Jack. I would love it if you did right now.
Yes, and sorry, also that it's important to know that the Austro-Hungarian Jews also had special reasons to fight the World War I, because many of them avoided the Russian pogroms some 10 years later before the World War I, and they moved to Austria-Hungary, which gave them a new home. And they were some of them wanted to take revenge on the Russians, who were really anti-Semitic of that age. What I wanted to ask from Jack is, how did Richard Stern feel about this situation as a World War I veteran? Because we heard these Nazi lies that Jews stabbed the Germans in the back. It's called the backstab myth. And in fact, the Germans betrayed the Jews, and the Jews were stabbed in the back. And for example, Hitler's direct superior, who was a Jewish guy, Hugo Gutmann, he escaped to America. He was refusing to talk about his experience. He was very, very reluctant to talk about anything in Germany. In Richard Stern's lifetime, you know him personally. Was he talking to you, or you found out more when you looked into his memories, to his writings? How did he feel talking about this? What kind of trauma was this for him?
He did not talk to me when I was a little boy about anything that had to do with his situation in Germany. He did not even tell me that he was in the American Army and became a hero in the American Army. He wouldn't mention a thing to me. The only reason I learned that when I was about 7 years old is because I was on a father-son trip with my dad, and it was a long drive. And Dad was telling me his stories of him being in the American Army, because Dad was in the American Army, as an immigrant. And then he said, "Oh, by the way, you should know this about Uncle Richard." And he told me the story of how he won the Silver Star, and said, that he had the articles in the New York newspapers that the family had saved, and I now have the articles from the New York newspapers. He was played on radio by a rather famous actor. In how they projected, who he was and what he did, and it was really an amazing thing. But Uncle Richard, he would tell me funny stories that had nothing to do with living in Germany. And nothing to do with his heroism. He just felt that wasn't. And in fact, after I learned that he won the Silver Star, the next time I was visiting his house, I ran into his house and I said, "Uncle Richard, where's the Silver Star?" Did I tell you where it was? Well, it was not anywhere outside on display. We went back into the bedroom that was also his office. And he opens up the bottom drawer of a desk and pulls out a pile of folders, and he takes out the box and he gives it to me, and he goes, "Here it is." And he goes then with his German accent, "Jackie, if you want the Silver Star, then you can have it when you're older." That was his reaction.
Wow. That's amazing. And we see that a lot with a lot of veterans, that you don't know what all they did until you hear it from someone else, or you find it in, like, you're doing research, genealogical. I'm sure, Peter, you've run across this too, where people don't know, or maybe you yourself didn't know that someone had done something in your own family tree and family lineage until you find it in an archive or in your family's archive, which is usually a desk drawer somewhere or a trunk.
And by the way, I must add that when I was ordained as a rabbi, a present that my dad gave me was a framed piece that had the picture of Uncle Richard protesting, a picture of him in the German army, a picture of him in the American army, and I have the actual Silver Star along with the letter written to him by General Mark Clark of the U.S. Army.
Wow.
Amazing.
Wow. And that's why when your book comes out, Jack, it's going to be so amazing. It's because such an interesting life, that one person had there with, standing up and fighting in the First World War, standing up for what they thought was right as far as civil rights is concerned, leaving, coming to the United States, standing up again for what they felt was right, and doing all that, and then just being like, okay, that part's done. I don't need to boast.
He just wanted to be the grandpa. He did not marry until late in life. He was 50 years old when he finally was able to get married. He couldn't get married once he had to take care of his sister and her son, when the Nazis were in power. And all he wanted to then have was a normal family kind of life. And so he looked at me and my brothers as his grandsons, and he just wanted to do things with us and not go into background or anything, just to have fun. And I would take walks with him as a little kid, and he would just be very funny and tell me funny stories and funny things. And so it was always just great to be with him and to to take the walks with him and listen to the funny things that he would say.
Mm-hmm.
It's also very interesting that Gentile World War I veterans were more likely to speak about their experience or remember positively about the comradeship, but we see the opposite with Central Power Jewish veterans, because they were betrayed, and there are also those who survived the Holocaust. I think there are two types of Holocaust survivors: one who speaks out and wants the world to know what happened, and the others who just don't want to talk about it. But I think that we, the next generation, we must talk about it, because they should not have died for nothing, and humanity can learn from this tragic experience. And it wasn't that long ago. The survivors of the Holocaust, the children of World War I veterans, are still with us, but as time goes, there will be less and less. So we need to preserve their memories.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that Uncle Richard wrote in letters during World War II that he would send to my dad, who he looked at as his son, one of the things he tried to do was constantly teach him the importance of why they were fighting against the Nazis. And especially after his unit went into the concentration camp of Dachau in late April of 1945. And he saw then what had happened to so many Jews. And he had already by that time then learned how his brother Heinrich had been killed in Auschwitz. And he wrote in a letter to my dad, because my dad was, a young man. He was only 22 years old at that point. And he said to him, we have to remember the nasty actions by the Nazis, and we cannot forget the reason for standing up and fighting in a battle like this and fighting against a group like this. And when I was a little boy, my dad actually, when he told me the first time about what had started to happen to his family in Germany, he did it only because he found out that I had said something nasty about an African American. And this is when we lived in West Virginia. And he pulled me aside one Sunday morning, and I was about 6 years old. And he said to me, here's what we went through in Germany. And here is how Jews were called awful names. You cannot do this to anybody else. You have to treat people well. You cannot treat them nastily. And so he put what he had heard me say about an African American in the context of what had happened to our family in Germany. And that stuck with me forever.
Wow, what a lesson. You know, that's just amazing. And with both these projects, I would like to highlight both of you to highlight what you believe the thesis or the moral of your project is, because everyone's got a thesis statement, you know, when they start a project, whether it's a book, a film, whatever it is. What do you want the audience? We'll start with you, Peter, and then we'll go to Jack. What do you want the audience to take away from your piece once it is completed?
Well, first of all, I want them to remember those Jewish heroes who fought for their countries in the World War I, and secondary, probably also most importantly, that people would view the Holocaust in a different way, that they would get a better understanding that Germany and Austria-Hungary were the lovely motherland for these Jews. And I just want them to imagine how would they feel if they were veterans and went through 4 years of service and then being killed by their own countries. So many veterans complained in their memories, those who survived, that actually the betrayal hurt them more than the physical atrocities. And also that we are living history. So many people don't understand why the Jews didn't live on time. They were living in their age. They didn't think that mankind would do it, that they would be systematically killed in gas chambers. And today we don't think like that. Who knows what kind of evil things can happen in the world? And we see that extremists are rising, not just in Europe, but also in America. And I think as a society, as humanity, we really need to stand together and tell these stories so we learn from, and we will not commit the same mistakes. And even if it doesn't matter today if who is being abused, any racist attacks must be intolerated and severely punished, whether it is against Black people or Asian people, as we just saw not long ago, or against Jewish people, which is unfortunately a long tradition of accusing Jews of everything. So I think as a society, we need to stay together, and hopefully this film will give a better understanding about this story for the people.
Jack?
Well, I tell the story of Uncle Richard's life in the context of German Jewish history, and I give the German Jewish history not huge amount, but enough so that people can see how it would have affected his life. But the real reason that I want this story out there and want the story of his life out there, well, number one is, as kind of his grandson, I feel like we haven't done for him what we should have. But the real big reason is that his life should be an inspiration for people even today to stand up for what's right.
That's so well put. I really appreciate that. And I know that everyone in the comments will appreciate that as well. Peter, I did place a link in the comment section so that others may find your piece and assist in any way that you may need, whether sharing it out or doing that. What is it that you need now from my viewers that would help out? Would it be sharing the site? What would it be?
Thank you very much for organizing this amazing program. Yes, if people could share and contribute, you know, for Americans, it's not going to be a big deal because after all, we have this non-profit status. So donations are tax deductible. As I said, we are independent and every donation helps. We applied for 4 major grants, but the results are to be announced in mid-late summer. Till that, it would be really good if we can also get some trainee colorists to help us, because you can imagine that colorizing frame by frame, especially a Holocaust victim, is emotionally, it's a terrible thing. I haven't watched the Holocaust film till 2016, and that was The Pianist that I watched, and I was in tears. And now I am doing this, colorizing with my childhood friend and with some volunteers for some hundreds of thousands of hours altogether. So every little helps. Details are on the website, so it's fairly easy to help us.
Yes, please go to jewishdocumentaries.info for more information on that film. And Jack, I placed a link to the article that was done by CNN last year about your piece. Is there any other links you would like me to place for your book, or anything else you would like me to place in the chat for those of us watching?
Not yet, but the book will be published. I've been told by the publishers somewhere around September 1st. And so I will post then, when it's out there. And God willing, the pandemic is at a point where I can actually start to appear in places where there are a number of places that have asked me to come and speak. And so hopefully I can come and do it. And I'm really looking forward to physically meeting with Peter when he gets to New York, because we have a place in New York as well. And we will definitely want to get together with Peter. Yes. And hopefully one day, John, and we can meet each other as well. And I can let you know when there's more to share.
Absolutely. Thank you. There is a question that I didn't ask for that book, Jack. Who is the publisher of the book? That's a great question, Gary. Thank you.
Okay. Amsterdam publisher.
Amsterdam. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Peter, Jack, thank you so much for your time today. This is a pleasure, and both of these works are going to be very deep and emotional for a lot of us to ponder these stories. And I'm really looking forward to both of your works coming out because, it's just going to be a great way for us to look inward at what this experience was like for thousands of people and understand this broad picture a little bit better than we do now. Each documentary which comes out helps out. Peter, yours is going to be great because you're going to add the colorization to it. That brings it home more for a lot of us, especially people who are just curious about history. Maybe they're not trained in how to do history, but they're curious, and it allows us to bring that to life in a different way. And Jack, with your personal story with Richard and what he went through, it's just going to touch a lot of people's hearts, and I can't wait to see the feedback from that. I can't wait to read it and enjoy it myself. So, gentlemen, if you have any last things you'd like to say before we go, we can do that.
I just want to thank you, John, for having us on. So appreciate the chance to get to meet you and talk with you.
The same. I'm really thankful for organizing this, and hopefully people got a better understanding about what we do. And this project will be unearthed. It will be unearthed soon, and really I think it will be a huge hit once it's ready. And it will be ready, but if we all work together, we will get there this year.
I'm very much looking forward to Peter's getting this film done. I think he's going to do a terrific job with it.
Yes, I know a lot of people are really looking forward to it, and it's great. And I thank Peter for reaching out to me. I don't know how many months ago it was about your work, and we had a big discussion about doing just this event, today and then future stuff together. And I'm proud to be listed as a supporter of your film on your site. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I'm really, really thankful, and I really appreciate your help. You do an amazing job, and the Tattooed Historian is an amazing place.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. Thank you everyone in the comment section, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. It means so much to all three of us that you were here live. It means so much if you came in later and you're going to see it a week from now. Just to know that our message is out there for you all to hear. It just means a lot to us. So thank you so much, everyone. We hope that you are safe and well. Please take care of yourselves. We will talk to you very soon.